Welcome, everybody, to the first ever episode of the Unpacking podcast. This is for entrepreneurs, executives, managers, small business owners, human beings who are looking to grow their business and grow their life. And the biggest obstacle that people have to grow their business and definitely to grow their life is to the extent that they have uncovered and unpacked their own patterns. And, so this is essentially, the principles that we've used to build our own business and taking it to the next level. And we've just unpacked ourselves. And today we're going to be talking about the big question that we get asked a lot. And I think it's what most people are asking is, how do I get more customers? How do I grow more customers? We work with mostly, from small business owners. I've trained Fortune 500 companies, and everybody, whether you're an executive at a big corporation or you're a small business owner, at the end of the day, it's about you. It's about you understanding how to communicate that message to attract other people. And David and I have just, I think the biggest value that we have, honestly, is what we've unpacked about ourselves and our own patterns, and definitely around obstacles around growing a business.
And that's really the key, Ari, is that everyone's looking for the external result, right? Our businesses, the impact we want to make in the world. It's always this external result, whether you're growing like a 7-8-figure company, whether it's a Fortune 500 company, whether you're starting up your own business, your own idea as an entrepreneur, everything is an external experience, an external result. But what we found through our work and through building our company and the stuff that we found so valuable is the internal game, is the unpacking of the experience. Because there's one more thing. There's whatever you're creating, you're never doing it alone. So you're always building a team. You're always doing it in partnership. So there's human dynamics. And the unpacking experience becomes so valuable. I mean, the core, everything, all of our success, our business, our financial success, everything about what we've created and what we're building, even just between you and me, Ari, it's all come through our unpacking and understanding these human dynamics. And I guess that the real vision for this podcast was, for us to really share these insights in the system that we've created that have worked for us, because ultimately the success of your business, your idea, and your impact in the world, it's not an outside-in equation. It's an inside-out game.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we've been talking about recently. That's exactly what we've been talking about.
So do you want to give a little bit of background on yourself and who you are? I'll introduce you. This is Ari Sherbel, my partner and friend. And you'll probably give a better introduction to yourself, but maybe we'll just tell people a little bit about who we are, what we do.
Yeah, I'll start with me, and then we would love to hear about you. And I think, first of all, before I even say what I'm saying, here's something for you to understand and listen to, which is one of the questions I ask most people consistently after, let's say I meet someone for the first time. Let's say you're listening to this right now. Let's say that we had a conversation. I got to know you, hear a little bit about what you're up to in the world. And I would ask you, this is what I ask a lot of people, have you ever thought about writing a book about your story? And except for, I think, one or two people, I've asked this to hundreds of people, except for one or two, every single person has said yes. And then the next question is, well, have you started? And of course, it's far, far away from anything that's ever going to be done. And the reason why I'm saying that before I even introduce myself is that everyone has a story. You have a story. You have a unique series of surprising, hidden, unknown, valuable, fascinating, magical sequence of events that have happened throughout your life, both painful and both pleasurable, both frustrating and both growing and expansive. And that's the frame from which I think we need to approach what we've done. The frame cannot be, here's my set of accomplishments, here's all the things that validate my own worthiness. Right. Here are the ways that by saying these actions that I've taken, that makes me feel that I'm worthy of something, that I deserve something, that I have significance in the world. And all of that is the secondary. If you're going to be talking about what you do, so everyone's like, well, I've done, and everyone sounds like the greatest thing on planet earth. And the truth is that, yeah, it's true. And what I'm going to share with you probably sounds exciting or probably sounds cool, but it's just me and you're just you. And anybody who's achieved anything, even the people who our culture most looks up to, they're just human beings with patterns.
Right. And unpacking, understanding those patterns, like it's basically what you're saying is that instead of taking credit for your external achievements and for a company's achievements to be seen as the actual bar of success, what we've touched on and really the movement that this is all about, the Unpacking Show is all about, is understanding the intricate jewels, the uniqueness of you and your human experience as the catalyst, as the driver for your business, for your idea. And the value is really being able to really understand and unpack that experience through a series of distinctions, right? Understanding it's like, people always ask, how do I do something? Well, I have an idea. How do I write a book? I want to start this business. How do I do it? And the funny thing is that there's always a million how-tos, right? And famous coach and mentor of mine, Steve Chandler, he said, it's not about the how-to, because there literally are millions and millions of how-tos. It doesn't, the how-to is never the problem. If you haven't started the book, if you haven't started the business, if you haven't cracked 7 figures, if you haven't hit the goal that you wanted to hit yet, the how-to is never the issue. What's missing is usually the want to, that there's not enough want to. And the want to comes from your internal desire. The want to comes from your internal alignment. The want to comes from being in a place of inspiration and clarity about what is this dream that you're doing? What is this dream that you're fulfilling? It was just this morning, actually, I was talking to a good friend and I had this huge shift, right? I have a vision to impact 1 million entrepreneurs around the world. I have a vision to create and inspire and help people step into what really is inspiring to them, bringing their dreams to life. And I had this huge download this morning that for a while my energy was feeling blocked. And what happened, there was a shift when you're focused on yourself, when you're focused on your own success, when you're focused on your own creation. So oftentimes that stifles your energy. And the moment you shift your energy, your outlook to the impact, to the people, right? If this is about me, if this is about David Betterman, then that idea is only going to get so far. And chances are it's going to get gunked up in my own human experience. But as soon as my focus is on the world, is on you, is on making an impact, is on inspiring other people, all of a sudden the energy and the inspiration flows. And so that's all within the context of what is this human experience? What's happening inside us? How do we come to a deeper, richer understanding of our motivations and our behaviors? And how do we unpack that and get to the core so that we can just be more impactful, more effective, more inspired entrepreneurs, executives, business people, human beings? And how can we have a bigger and richer impact with each other in this world?
Yeah, love that frame, man. And that's another thing that we're going to talk about a lot, is our frames. But so that was the frame for me to tell my story and you to tell your story, and then also the story of how we've come together and impacted, more people collectively. So I'm only going to start with the story. I don't know. I'm debating how far back I should go because it is expressive. In other words, here's what's interesting. Right now, we're building our sales team. And what's really interesting about the sales team that we're building is asking people, and I ask this before clients become clients and before I meet with people, I'm always, tell me about you. Tell me about your story, what you've been doing until now. And guess what? A lot of the salespeople, I think we have about 14 or 15 as of today, who are starting with us. And I'd say definitely more than half were not salespeople a year ago. Half of the people I have another profession, have another area of expertise, or doing something else. In other words, whatever it is that you're doing, you've got other things going on because we're living in a time where there's an overwhelming / magnificent opportunity to fully express yourself and fully experience what life is offering all of us, especially at what I call the greatest time in human history, and I think it's only getting better. So even what I talk about, it's not really who I am. Like, yes, I'm a marketing consultant. That's what I use. That's not who I am. Who I am is just who I am, and who you are is who you are, and who David is, right? You're an executive coach. You're not you are who you are, but we use these terms because we need to use these terms. The question around the podcast, and this is what we want to ignite this conversation, is asking the question and unpacking, why do we need these terms? The terms are needed, they serve us, they are useful, but they're also intensely limiting. So when I tell you, and all of this, that's why I haven't said what I say, because as soon as I say what I say, then people are like, people have a certain association. I want to pre-frame those associations so you have a deeper relationship with me, so we can have a more valuable conversation, and for me to emphasize that it's not about the title, it's not about the accomplishment, it's not about the dollars. Anybody who really has achieved any level of accomplishment, let's say they wanted to make $10,000 a month, they wanted to become, have enough money where they're able to write a $2 million check to someone, or they're able to buy that second, whatever it is, you will quickly realize, that wasn't exactly what I was even looking for. That's not even what I wanted.
That's helping me come up with a frame. Like, let's do this. I mean, let me ask you this question, Ari, right? What was the frame of what was the frame of your greatest unpacking experience? What's the frame around where you started to gain awareness of how valuable unpacking was for you in your personal life and in your business life? You want to tell us that story?
I mean, I think,
because that's really the foundation of what this podcast is born out of, and that's really the foundation of what we're hoping to convey here, to the thousands and tens of thousands and very soon hundreds of thousands of people, of business people, entrepreneurs around the world, is sharing this perspective of unpacking and tools to really gain a deep awareness about your habits, your patterns, your behaviors, right? To become more productive, to become more effective, to become more inspired, to become more fulfilled, happier. So I know that you and I each had, certainly together, right? Because I think the frame that I'm thinking of is really how we first started to notice how different we were and how differently we process the world. I don't know if you wanted to touch on that in this episode.
I definitely do want to touch on that.
And I thought that could be a good frame now for just introduction.
Yeah.
Because when we came together, we both had a vision of doing internet marketing, of making a bigger impact. But I don't think either of us had any clue of how difficult it was going to be when we actually started to work together, because we were such different people. You want to touch on that?
Yeah. First,
your experience.
Yes. First of all, I want to tell that story. I'm going to tell that story. And before I tell that story, of one thing that I want to share, like you asked how I came to this
your experience of unpacking when you're first.
I think both of us. I think me personally, I was always asking questions, I'd almost define unpacking as noticing and questioning the things that you assume are true. I think that's definitely a starting point. It's not something that we've worked on. I just sort of came up with that on the spot, but that's based on what it is. And I think my whole existence, I've always been asking a lot of questions. I'm just sort of holding myself back from like how deep down we're going down the rabbit hole. But
I mean, we're going down. We're never going to stop. That's the whole point. But that right there is just huge. I mean, the quality of your life is created by the quality of your questions. That's Tony Robbins, and that's it. All of this frames, all the unpacking, all of the results that you create in the world, that any of us create. It's all based on the quality of our questions. And I think our whole experience as entrepreneurs and as partners has just been one long process of guiding and helping and inspiring each other to just ask better and better questions, because the question that you're asking is the frame for your experience. Like if you go into a McDonald's and you're like, I'm hungry. Like if your frame for feeding yourself is through the question of, what can I afford here? I don't know. This is the best example, but that the quality of your question will directly affect your results. So if the question you're asking is what job can I get? Right? What do I need to study to get a job? What job can I get to make the most money? Right? That's one question. But that very question itself determines the quality of your life. And when you can, I've spent like tens of thousands of dollars on my own coaching, on up leveling, and every single experience with a coach was always around up leveling the quality of the questions. And so you can ask the question, what do I need to study so I can get a good job so I can make money? Or you can ask the question, what's my greatest gift to the world? And the results of the life you're going to live, the trajectory, you just change. Like an airplane just changes course 1 centimeter, but it ends up on a different continent. And so, yeah, I just want to touch on that. And when we came together, so just learning to ask different questions. What's one of the first questions go ahead.
Well, I'll tell the story. It was a good story. It was on a weekend. So at the time I was, I basically had a full-time gig as a consultant, I guess you could call it. And I had been wanting to, but the thing about the consultancy model is that it's based on gigs and clients, and I wanted something that was scalable, which is only again a better question, which is
time for dollars. You're trading time for dollars.
How can I scale? How can I impact more people without doing more work? And it's not about. And again, the frame was never how do I work less. The more was like I have more to give, but there's only so many hours in the day. How do I have more leverage so I have bigger impact? I have more income. I have more freedom so that I can create more. And without asking those questions consistently, you're just going to end up circulating around whatever you perceive is your ability and is your ability to influence your circumstance. So if you are 100% convinced that, let's say you're making, I don't know, $8,000 to $10,000 a month in some managerial executive job, or let's say $20,000 a month as an executive, then that's what your mind tells you. And the 9 to 5 or 8 to 7, whatever the hell it is, the hours that you work, then those are all your limitations. So what I was asking myself was, how do I have a bigger impact? And I had been studying, obviously, internet marketing, and so I started with going after a vertical. At the time, I had been training about, I don't know, 3 to 5,000 people a month. And those people who were coming to our webinars at the time, mostly through Powtoon, the company that I was working in, they were small business owners from every category that you can imagine: restaurant owners, product owners, hair salon owners, yoga instructors, chiropractors, dentists, doctors, etc., professors of university, managers in government offices, executives in Fortune 500 companies, and educators. And I got to spend a lot of time with these people. And then, through them attending my training, I realized that that the information that I thought was obvious, that no one even needed to learn, all these thousands of people from Fortune 500 companies to small businesses ended up signing up for my trainings, and the trainings were all around, how to attract more people to to watch your video, how to get more customers, how do you grow your sales, how to increase your YouTube channel, whatever it was, and all these people coming. So then I thought, okay, so what I'm going to do is instead of talking about marketing or sales, I'm going to help one specific vertical. And I went to target health and wellness because they've personally transformed my life. They're principles that I live by. So I created a course, and part of the course, and at the time that you came in, I think we sold, it was just the beginning. It was the first few weeks. I think it was about $20,000 worth of the course, which told me this has potential. And that was just from working on the weekend. And then I said we should do a high-end coaching program. And I wanted your expertise because at that time you had also been selling I don't know, close to like 6 figures or more than 6 figures in high ticket coaching. So what happened was, it was 1 week. Yeah.
Well, and what I really wanted from that place also was leverage, was instead of just one-on-one, being able to impact more people and get more freedom so I can do more speaking, more traveling. And so that was really the synchronicity that brought us together, kind of linking this high ticket coaching and this internet marketing. So what did you want to say next?
Yeah, so it was on the weekend. So, and our other friend David was over, and I was I was trying to figure out how to succeed in the job I was at and build this thing on the side, which is, at some point you're going to quickly learn you're going to have to make a choice, dude. So on the weekend, I was depleted of energy. I was tired, which is the perfect storm for unpacking. Because if you're holding on to things that are not serving you, you're not actually going to be able to notice it or see it. If you are, I don't know, if you're thrilled, if you're excited, if you're not in a open enough space to see the pattern. So because the starting point is that it was the weekend, and the second point was I was full-time job, I needed time and space, but at the same time, we were still building this thing. I had approached you, and you came up to me. I remember I was on the couch. I wasn't feeling 100% because also I wasn't feeling 100% because I was in a state of internal conflict. By the way, I think that all pain stems from UIC, unconscious internal conflicts. Emphasize the unconscious part. So if I just say internal conflict, you say, oh, I'll go think about my internal conflicts. The problem is that they're unconscious. You don't even know what's floating in your mind. So that's the context. The context is I was tired. I was not feeling 100%. But at the same time, we were trying to build this business. And you said, Ari, what's our strategy moving forward? And that, and what happened was, and this is what we're going to unpack. To me, it was obvious, whatever the strategy was, because I have buckets and buckets and buckets of strategies. There's no lack of, this was the exact conversation, right? I had buckets of strategies. I could think of any strategy. That's not the problem. The problem is, the problem then was that I just wanted to chill out. But where were you coming from asking that question? Do you remember?
What was the question?
What's our strategy moving forward? In other words, we had this course, and then we're going to sell the high ticket coaching program. I don't know if you already sold 1 or 2 of the high ticket coaching programs at that point. But basically where it's coming from, this is something that we're going to talk about and unpack in the podcast, is judge or perceiver, which is a phenomenal, powerful, transformative concept once you fully understand it. Even if you've heard about Myers-Briggs, it doesn't fully explain the pervasiveness of the distinction between judger and perceiver, and we're going to really do some deep dives into the pervasiveness of that distinction.
And that's really the real frame for unpacking, because we all look at the world through our own eyes, and then we all often experience other people as some form or some reflection compared to our own experience. But what's so powerful about these distinctions that we're about to dive into is that it gives you a frame to deeply, deeply understand somebody else's experience. And I think that as you and I started working closely together, we started to notice very sharp, very distinct differences. I was recently divorced, so I was spending a lot of time there with you at the computer, and we were working. And the closer we started working together, we started there was friction being created. And it really got difficult to work because our own, what did you call them, UICs? Unconscious.
Internal conflict.
I love it. The great terms. We're going to load up on the acronym soup.
Yeah, I exist in acronym university.
Yeah, unconscious internal conflicts. But that's it. But what was so powerful is because I've been studying these distinctions and patterns for over 20 years. They formed the foundation of my coaching, and it's one of the things that I brought to this business. That all of a sudden I realized that there's a way of perceiving, right? Through Myers-Briggs talks about a lot of distinctions, judge or perceiver. And what's so fascinating is that that this personality typing system, which is extremely popular, it's used in probably thousands of companies around the world in attitude assessment and typing people. But what's so fascinating is that what really boils down to is that there's two ways of processing anything in life. Your entire experience of life can either be experienced through your left brain or through your right brain. And the foundation of this distinction, this judge or perceiver, is really what boils down to time. How do you experience time? How is your experience of life processed? And if you process time, if you process the experience of living through your left brain primarily, right, we call you a judger, which means you can perceive time, you can organize it. You're very structured on the outside, but inside your inner experience is very free flowing, right? Compared to someone who is in kind of an endless stream of time, isn't constantly tracking the passage of time, but we call this a perceiver, right? And this was the main frame that we discovered early on, was that, Ari, you're a hardcore perceiver, right? You live and you process the world very much through your right. And where I was coming in at that point was very strong in the left. So what that meant is I was very good with details and structure and systems and organization and a very compartmentalized way of looking at and experiencing the world, which was my strength, right? And your strength was being very tuned in to a creative download. Well, here's a great question to really frame this up, right? So we'd be writing email responder series, and I remember probably what defined my experience of understanding this distinction between us, which really itself created all the leverage that we've been able to hit and what we're growing into, were the questions. Like, I would ask you, hey, dude, what's this email going to be about, right? And your answer was always,
I don't know.
I got to put on a pair of headphones, blast some music, and it'll come to me. Now, that shocked me, because that's when I started to realize that something's going on. I think I hadn't deeply gotten into judge or perceiver at that time, but that's when I started to realize. So I started asking more questions. And what's interesting is that when I write emails, when I write copy, I need complete silence. It's got to be dead quiet. I can't have headphones on. In fact, most of the time, I've got to have earplugs in. Now, what's interesting is when I observe you, right, the only way you can create is with the opposite, with headphones in, with music on. Okay, so that's one distinction. Judgers are usually people who organize in their left brain, but they can't hear. They can't hear other stimulus. But perceivers, you have this creative stream, and you're not distracted by the words, right? And here's another thing: when perceivers listen to the music, they hear the music. They don't often hear the words. In order to hear the words, you got to really focus. So it's not about good or bad, but we just started noticing that we're both very, very different. And originally, that difference created a lot of conflict. But slowly, I started to learn about the things that you, as a perceiver, as somebody who's processing through the right, and we'll keep going into this. So if you don't really understand what we're saying, left or right, it'll become a lot clearer in future episodes, because we're going to be referring to this a lot. But I just started to really understand what you needed environmentally to succeed and what I needed. And the more that understanding, the more our understanding of this frame of left brain, right brain, judge or perceiver, the more we understood it, the more we unpacked it, the less friction we had between us, and the more we were really able to leverage our own strengths. And that's when things really started to take off.
Yeah. And specifically what happened was, so you asked, and this was really the beginning of our own unpacking, which led to our own evolution of growth, which, quickly turned into revenue, quickly turned into partners, quickly turned into all kinds of opportunities. But it started with you asked that question, like, what's the strategy? And now we're not going to go into the Enneagram at this point.
Too many frames for one episode.
But just from the judger, and also your core personality of being someone who, when you have a question or when you need an answer or when you want to do something, you will you will make it happen. You have like a when that trigger sets, like it's like go. I'm going to make this happen. It's a powerful force.
I call it the steam engine.
The steam engine. And so your question / the thing that you needed an answer was like, what's the strategy? Like, I get this is we're selling a course, we're doing it, but what's the next step? How are we going to get traffic? And to me, that's sort of like asking, what color should we use when we paint I mean, we could choose it blue, purple, it doesn't really matter, whatever. But because again, I wasn't feeling 100%, it was the weekend, I needed time away. So I was vulnerable and triggerable. That's not a good word, triggerable, but I was triggerable. I was
in a triggerable state.
I was fitting for a growth experience. And so you kept on persisting. And so I said, I don't know. And I was just like sort of hoping that would sort of say, again, because being a perceiver, being in my right, being someone at the time who definitely avoided conflict at all costs, which I've been growing through, because conflict can totally be, nothing is anything to avoid or not to avoid. So you said, but what's the strategy? And again, David was there and I was like, I don't know. And then you just kept on persisting and then you were like up in my face. And then when I screamed or I yelled, whatever it was, but I definitely was at a point where I was so frustrated that I expressed it vocally, which I never do unless I'm really triggered. And then I think the fact that I screamed shocked us both. I think it was a pattern interrupt because if I'm yelling, then something's really off. Something's really off.
And that was before I even understood like judges often they need the structure in order, they need a very clear structure in order to focus their energies into something. So I know I was feeling frustrated because there was just this idea, but it's like something in the clouds and I didn't know how to bring it down. And I didn't understand that the way perceivers perceive experience, it comes down. And that's a classic conflict between judges and perceivers, is that perceivers are often feel threatened that judges are trying to cram them into a confined space, right? Instead of just being in the free flowing mode of inspiration that it's going to come when it comes. And that's really important to notice. If you're somebody that's really good at details, but you're working with people on a creative team who maybe they show up late 10 or 15 minutes for meetings all the time and it frustrates you, chances are they're a perceiver. Chances are their frame and their experience of time is completely different than yours. And understanding that is how you diffuse these kind of conflicts, but give each person the space that they need. I need structure in order to focus my energies, but Ari also needs space in order to allow the ideas to flow in, and having that clarity is like, that's $1 million clarity.
Yeah. And first, what we're not going to get into now is, aside from the just general judge or perceiver distinction, there's judge or perceiver in 4 quadrants. There's judge or perceiver in time, people, information, and decisions. So that's for another time, but right now we've been talking about time, but it's also people and information without getting into it. And yeah, essentially that led to, I think it was really a year. It was a year from that November. It was in November, December until, no. I think it's like 2 years because it's been 2 years. Yeah, it's been 2 years now. So I think that's what it almost takes. Like here's the other thing that I said, and like I left you a WhatsApp message a few nights ago before we, totally categorized the theme of the podcast. And one of the things I said to you was how I think post World War II, one of the things that I'm going to talk about a lot is perspective, and there's a lot of perspectives that we're missing out on, I think, as a culture. One of them is understanding the perspective of where we are in history and the values and the conversations that we're all having, and we're missing out because if you only talk about what you're talking about without the context of what time in history it is, you're missing out on really understanding the value, the opportunity, and what it's part of. So, if like a baby is learning to crawl, however you interpret that, it's cute, it's delicious, why aren't they crawling faster, whatever, crazy interpretation it would be. It's all part of growing up, right? It's not about trying to get to walk. That's obviously not the goal. It's just part of growing up. So I said to you, like post World War II, I have to go a little bit meta here. A little bit meta. So one of the reasons why I say we're living in the greatest time in human history is because you have to understand the evolution of human consciousness throughout history, and even if you talk about the 50s. So I'm talking about post World War II, without even talking about the world wars, without even talking about before in the 19th century. We're not even going back, like 200 years ago, there was slavery and civil war. Like there's a lot of really crazy realities that we just take for granted and we think it was a far time away. 200 years ago in history is nothing. And one of the things so let's say post World War II began sort of a fast expansion of the personal development, let's just say, industry and conversation. So you had people like Tony Robbins is obviously the most famous, the most well-known, sort of like the icon of personal development. And a lot of people in our generation who are in the personal development, personal growth space have been affected by him. But let's just say that as a metaphor has, in terms of personal development and even the message of Tony. And I can't even say enough about Tony because he's a genius. And either you've studied Tony or you haven't studied Tony, because you can know about Tony, but unless you've studied his work, you don't really appreciate the depths of his insights. But it's all essentially about making more money, being happier, being wealthier, having a better body, more and better, bigger, faster, better, stronger. And that's great, right? That leads to the 80s and the 90s, and people wanted to become multimillionaires in the .com and the internet and then social media. But I think what is beginning to happen now, as of, late October 2018, and this has been happening for some period of time, whatever it is, but I think the next move forward is not so much about getting and creating more or better. I think what we're going to be consumed with as a culture and obsessed with and determined to have a better understanding of as a culture is understanding ourselves, because it's not about making more money. It's not. It's not about looking better. It's not about having a better body. It's not about definitely not about having more sex. It's definitely not about finding your love, because what you will find out at every stage of you getting what you quote unquote want is that it is not what you want, because you haven't unpacked the operating system that is telling you that you even want this.
Yeah. What's the drive, right? Exactly. What are the unconscious drives? Yeah. I love that. That's really, really deep. And that's what makes this time so powerful, is that it's really about, the collective unpacking of information, the collective building of consciousness, the internet as a kind of a spiritual metaphor of how billions of people, right, of how all these separate individual creatures that we are all coming together, right, as a unified consciousness, as one mind, and that this great interconnection between all of us, that's all kind of happening through the internet, is really the conduit to disseminate information, to spread more and more information, more and more understanding, which really brings us to that place of being able to have just a very, very deep understanding about our human experience, and more importantly, about the motivations, right? What is motivating you? That's everything that we've touched on, right, through the different personality patterns, which we'll get into. But what's motivating you? Like great, you're building $100 million business, but you're miserable. Like you have like a really successful startup, a multi-million-dollar, $100 million startup, and you scream at your employees, or you're a wreck. You're not happy. Like what is up with all of the? And there's an unconscious drive towards success. There's unconscious drives towards kindness. We all have a capacity to get lost in our unconscious experience, to be driven, and that's really, you can be driven towards weight loss and a beautiful body, and you can be driven towards success and making millions of dollars. You can be driven towards making a worldwide impact. But if it's coming from a place of unconsciousness, if it's coming from just a robotic habit, without you having a deep awareness of what's really driving you, I think your success and ultimately your experience of that whole journey is going to be limited. And it's like, I've talked to people like CEOs, like one really young CEO just came, she was speaking at the UN, and she said to me, David, we were I've just started my fourth company, and I don't know why. I feel like I'm on a hamster wheel of creation and I don't know what's going on, right? And sadly, this is the story that I hear over and over again. And exactly like you say, like this really is the greatest moment in human consciousness, because it's no longer about, and that really is the frame for this show. It's like, it's no longer about the result. It's about the quality of the experience of getting there, the quality of the journey. And the more we can unpack and understand the unconscious motivation, right? I think the more we can really, the more insight and the more enjoyment and the more passion, the more joy, the more love we can experience, and then we can spread through our work. And maybe just to chunk up for a second, where all of this fits in is that if you're an executive, if you're building a company, if you have a dream, whatever your drive in the world is, getting more leverage on yourself and on your interactions with the people in your life, the people in your workplace, all of that, bringing what I call making the unconscious conscious, is the key to everything that you want to experience. You think it's about the money, you think it's about the impact, you think it's about the external source like we spoke about in the beginning, but really getting a bird's eye view of your own experience and unpacking it at the consciousness level to figure out what is driving you. Where did these patterns start from? That gives us a tremendous amount of leverage for being able to create more, to interact more, and ultimately to just feel better, in the world and with the people and our relationships. And it applies to everything: business, growth, life. And that's really the frame for this podcast, is really linking together. It's kind of like in the scientific world, in the medical world, how like for years, certainly in Western medicine, the understanding was that the mind and the body are separate. And obviously, Eastern medicine, Eastern philosophy, they understood that was fundamentally flawed. But I think it took the Western world, pretty much into, the late 1900s to figure it out, to start linking it out. Certainly science and Western medicine, they've got it now, but the mind and the body are one. So to the business and the personal, right? The professional and the internal experience, they're two parts of a greater whole. And the more that we can understand and unpack our own human experience, right? Our whole business, it's all one thing, right? It's not like we have professional lives and personal lives anymore. It's like, it's now in the internet age, it's like, it's all one. Because you never turn off from your personal life. Your personal life is your business life. And it's the same thing. If there's things that are unresolved, if you're going crazy on the inside, if you're dealing with tension, it's showing up in the workplace. But now more than ever, you can't hide it. And so we have to become holistic beings. We have to be holistically aligned with our mission, with our business, with ourselves, and it all has to come together. And I think that's really a big piece of what we want to convey in this podcast is bring those tools to kind of help the work life and the personal life and the dream, because it's not about having a job anymore. Your job now is your mission, and people are going to come to work. Like we left at 10 o'clock the other night. There were still people here. Because it's not about your job and going home. Your job is your mission. That's how I feel about it. I know that's how you feel about it. And when it's that interconnected, so your human personal experience has to be very, very clear. And you have to always be in a place where you're able to access that inspiration, where you're able to reconnect with the dream and keep it alive. And that's where impact comes from.
Dude, that was awesome. I realize that we have a call in like 8 minutes. Too bad, because we could literally keep on going. Plus, there's a lot of open loops that I didn't answer, like the story that I wanted to tell first about my background and how I came to advise Fortune 500 companies and built the company that we've built and where it's going.
I thought you put those open loops in on purpose, by the way. That's your calling card. Open loops. Open loops are us.
I wanted to give context, because it's not about the answer. Everyone else just, I've done this and I've been the best and the greatest and I'm most amazing. Great. That's not the point. And I think that's one of the biggest values of the podcast, and the message is that let's have a more valuable conversation. No one needs to be impressed. You don't need to impress. That was definitely an unconscious pattern for me. Anyways, we got to end this, but we're going to answer all those questions in upcoming episodes. And there's a lot of good stuff coming. So yeah, what do you have to say, dude?
Awesome. Yeah, I loved it. This is great. And so yeah, look forward next week. I think we're going to be doing one of these a week, but do us a favor, leave us the questions that you want to answer in the comments, and like and share this. Spread us if this impacted you, if this inspired you. Share it with someone who you think would enjoy it, and leave your comments and your questions below. We'd love to hear them. We'd love to answer them on an upcoming episode. I'm David Betterman.
Yeah, I'm Ari Sherbel. And one thing just before, because the rate in the comments and the shares is really important context. And I think that if this has really, any part of it has sort of like hit you, has made you feel something, then when you do share it with someone, not sharing on an, oh, look, I heard this podcast, it was really cool, but like with a friend who is aligned in the conversations and the values and the insights and the perspectives that you have, then collectively we can have a really valuable conversation, and that can really lead inherently to some, a lot of really transformative experiences and messages and conversations with people. And I think that's what the fact that podcasts are a thing is all about.
I think they're the thing.
The thing.
The thing. Rock and roll. Love it, man.
Gotta take the call. Lots of love, dudes.
Lots of love. We'll talk soon. This has been episode 1 of the Unpacking Show. Hope you liked it.